Wheels and Wires, and today we are going to do a review on the Kia Niro EV. For this review, we're going to rate a few different areas. First, we're going to rate the specifications, then we're going to rate the looks, then we're going to hit up the features, the driving, and then the overall vehicle experience. I'll take the ratings from each of those and come up with a total score. So check out how I review this vehicle right after this. Alright, so let's start out with specifications. This vehicle is the base model. It comes in at $39,090. It has a range of 239 miles. It has 64 kilowatt battery and 100 kilowatt fast charging. Also has an absolute ton of safety features. It has lane departure warning, forward collision warning, blind spot warning, rear cross traffic warning, adaptive cruise control, automatic emergency braking, and Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. So there's an absolute ton of features built into this on the base model. So because of all the features built in, I'm giving it an 8 out of 10 for all these features and specifications. Alright, so the next thing we'll review on this vehicle is what it's like to actually drive it. This is probably one of its weaker areas for me. There's nothing specifically wrong with the way this vehicle drives, but there's also nothing particularly great about it either. It's a little soft around the corners, I noticed. I'm used to a much crisper ride with the i3 with its 20-inch wheels and very kind of sporty suspension. It comes around corners very crisp, and you can really throw it around there. This feels a lot softer going around those corners, not near as much fun. Next thing is the acceleration on this vehicle. It's really nice that it has a 0 to 60 in 6.2. You don't feel it as much as you do in other vehicles. I know my i3 actually has a much slower 0 to 60. It's like 7.9 because I have the Rex model. And I feel the acceleration more than I do in this. If you find this video helpful, give it a thumbs up. And if you want to support the channel, hit subscribe. And don't forget the bell icon so you don't miss any new videos. Also listen to the end for my new subscriber shout out. So like most, if not all EVs, this vehicle has multiple driving modes. Particularly it has 3. It has Eco, Normal, and Sport. So the Eco mode is pretty disappointing to drive, but that's the same as most EVs, or Eco mode is pretty disappointing. When you move up to Normal, that is a more respectable drive. It definitely accelerates in a way you would want to, and it's a bit more fun. You have Sport mode, which is a lot more the way I'm used to driving. It's really aggressive acceleration. The interesting thing though is when you put this vehicle in sport mode, the regenerative braking drops down to its lowest level, so you don't get full advantage of the regenerative braking. I know like in my i3 I use comfort mode, which is the highest mode the regular i3 has, and I still have the same regenerative braking. I just have better acceleration. So it'd be neat if this vehicle could still give you the option of having a higher level of regenerative braking even when you're in sport mode, but it doesn't appear to be able to do that. One of the interesting features of this vehicle is that you can control how much regenerative braking you have. Here on the right you have a paddle shifter, and this decreases your regenerative braking. And then over here on the left, you have one to increase it. Now, you can see where it increases and decreases right here on the wheel. And I'll show you as I cycle through how that looks. So I can increase the regen using the left paddle, and it increases. It has 3 separate setting levels. And then as I hit the one on the right, it will decrease them. It's an interesting use of paddle shifters. However, that's what it has. An interesting note is even at its most aggressive level 3 regenerative braking, it still is not as aggressive as some other vehicles. I know my i3's regen is more aggressive than that is, even on its highest level. One feature I really do enjoy about these paddle system they have is that you can actually modulate your driving kind of like you have the distortion bar and electric guitar, call it the whammy bar. I call this the whammy bar on this vehicle. What you can do is say you're rolling up to an intersection and your regen isn't going to stop you in time. Not to hit the vehicle in front of you. This doesn't work, of course, if you're plowing towards them. You should use your brakes. But if you're going just a little quicker than you would want to, you can actually pull back and hold on the regen increase paddle, and this will slow you down much quicker. This gives you a really aggressive stop and really aggressive regen. The thing I don't like about this, though, is sometimes when you come off of it, when you're driving, it'll actually change your regen level. So I've had times where it's reset it back to 1, sometimes it bumps it down to 2, sometimes it leaves it right at 3. It's really inconsistent on that. Also, an interesting thing about these regen settings, it seems like every time I get in the vehicle, it resets it to 1. So every time you get in, if you want to have it at 3 like I do, you have to bump it up into it every time you start the vehicle. So this is kind of inconvenient. It'd be really great if it had a memory setting of where you left it last, because it's kind of inconvenient to have to do that every single time you start your vehicle. All right, so your control touchscreen has got a lot of different features. It's got a lot of different layers to it. It can be a little quirky, though, and here's a couple examples. So it uses kind of an Android kind of setup with a home button, and you have all your various features. I've noticed that, and this will probably get better as I would get more familiar with the vehicle, but sometimes I can spend a lot more time than I would want to picking features on this screen, which could be dangerous if you're driving while you're doing this. So until you get really familiar with it, and maybe even then, this is definitely something that would be at a stoplight to make any changes. That being said, there are shortcut keys across the bottom here for map, nav, radio, media, and setup. So that kind of helps you get to stuff. You also looks to have a favorite button. So if you have something you need to get to very quickly that you use more often that isn't one of these shortcut buttons, you can do that as well. But for example, if I want to get to see some of my EV range settings, I would have to come up here to the home button, come over here to EV, and then I would have it. Now, when I talk about quirky, here's a kind of an interesting thing. So you have your shortcut buttons here, you have your climate controls down here, but you can also, let me go home again, you can also get straight to your EV section from an EV button here in the climate settings. It's a really neat feature that it has that, but it's kind of weird that it's located there. So there is definitely a learning curve on driving this vehicle because there's some stuff in some odd places, and it's definitely something you would have to get used to. Also, as a complete side note, they probably need to update their software or their database because it's showing me right now, which is a nice feature, that it shows the nearest charger. So it has me 0.2 miles away from a Blink charger. Why I say they need to update it is that charger has been gone for about 6 months now. It's been replaced by a whole series of Volta chargers. So if I was looking specifically for a Blink charger, I would not find it. It's gone. So they should probably update their database a little bit better on that. I don't know what they're using as a feeding source, but they should definitely update it. Offset some of the complicated nature of using a touch screen. What they did is built in some really nice features into the steering wheel. You have your standard call and hang up, volume, menu scroll, mode, which for example lets me, if I hit the button, calls up my Bluetooth for my phone. And of course you have the voice assistants. On the other side is the part that's a little neater. So one, you have your standard cruise control setting stuff. You also have this neat little multi-page button, which I find really fascinating because what it does is it lets you scroll between various features. This is your lane change settings. This is user settings like the driver assistance, doors, lights, convenience, and use the scroll here to go between them. Right, hit it again. You have your energy flow, which is the default display. So, and you hit it again, you get a compass, which I find kind of neat because there are times when I've actually needed one, and sometimes you have to go messing with stuff, and here you just hit the button and you get it right there. Other neat touches is you have your regular USB port here, a cigarette lighter outlet here. You have a, what I'm told by my son, is a high power USB connection here. And by the way, you can set your phone, you have a phone storage bin here, or just a storage bin, and it has Qi charging built into it. So that's really nice. You also have a little bit of a storage bin here in the center as well. You have your center control. This is really weird coming from a BMW because I'm used to this being the iDrive and how you control the menu, which is not what this does here. This is actually your shifter, right? You can literally put it in reverse, turn it to center, neutral, then put it to left, and it's drive. This is kind of weird. Seat warmers down here, parking brake. You can also apply the parking right there in the center. You also, here's where your drive mode setting is, I mentioned before. Also have this center area here. This is kind of got some clever stuff to it. It has some kind of opening here that's for some feature that I'm not exactly sure what it is. It also has these really interesting button activators, right? You have this, you have it set up for an open design, and then if you would want to have a cup holder in here, what you actually do is press release, and it swings out with a ring that can now make this a cup holder. All right, and then this whole thing can just be covered if you want to have a solid area on top of it. It's a standard accordion kind of top. You also have a center armrest, which has storage bin below it too. So there's plenty of storage in here. You also have your standard indoor pockets. You have a small cup holder. I wouldn't put like a large soda in it, but it'd be good for an okay size. And then a little pocket over here. So for the experience of driving this vehicle, how would I rate this? It's somewhere between a 6 and a 7. Again, there's nothing specifically wrong with it. But between the quirks and the regen and just the way it drives, it feels when I'm driving, it's a little lackluster. Somewhere between a 6 and a 7, but since I can't say that there's anything bad about the drive, I'm going to go ahead and put it in as a 7. All right, so when we're talking about looks, this is not this vehicle's strong point. The external design of this is, well, for lack of any better word, pretty boring. There's nothing that is really interesting or exciting about it. I find myself kind of not really seeing anything particularly nice about it. It does come with alloy rims, which is nice. It's got some really neat features like the accents on the front and back. But overall, yeah, boring. One note to this vehicle's credit is it is pretty fairly spacious for this type of vehicle. You've got a fair amount of room in the front seat. The back seats are comfortable enough. My front seat is in a comfortable driving position. Passenger seat's pretty fairly far back, and you can still see that there's still a decent amount of leg room in the back. And the storage in the back is much bigger than my i3. So this is a good amount of storage, and of course the seats flip down. You also have an access cover right here, which is where you can store your cable, and a couple other little doodads if you wanted to do that. Speaking of storage space, one place where you might find yourself very disappointed with this vehicle is the front, because there isn't one. They put all of the machinery and everything in the front of the vehicle. I think this is a byproduct of this being a multi-use platform. An important point about this vehicle is, unlike a Tesla or an i3 or a Mustang Mach-E, this is a multi-drivetrain platform. You can get this in the gas engine model, a hybrid model, or in the full EV model. So I think because it shares all these different platforms, they basically just designed it to interchange whatever's here in the middle, right? If it was a gas vehicle, it would be the engine here. As it's an EV, it's the electric motor is here, and they just structure it all as if it was the same drivetrain. Saves money in production and simplifies production. And I do have to say, unlike some other electric vehicles, one benefit of this is everything is very easy to get to. Changing the battery on an i3, for example, is not the easiest thing in the world, whereas here it is as easy, if not easier, than a traditional ICE vehicle. mostly because it's a lot smaller than a nice vehicle battery. All right, for looks, I'm going to give this a 6. There's nothing particularly bad looking about the vehicle, but there's nothing particularly good looking about it either. Not that I have any room to talk, but it's a pretty boring looking car, and it just doesn't really enthuse me. The interior is definitely where this vehicle makes up some points. It's nicely appointed. You have some, I'm assuming it's vinyl seats with cloth inserts on this model. I'm sure they have some other options as well. You have a really nice setup inside. Let me hop in, where you can see some of the nice materials. Like, for example, the aluminum strip here feels like it really is metal, probably aluminum. It's not some aluminum coated plastic or something like that. And the material on the top is soft. Vinyl with stitching on the console and on the doors. It also has a pretty good sound system. It's a Harman Kardon system right from the get-go. For the inside, on the other hand, I'm going to be giving that an 8 overall. It has some nice premium feel to it, some nice richness to the materials and everything. So definitely a much better interior. If the external looked as nice as the inside, this would be a great vehicle, but unfortunately it doesn't. So between the two, it's going to come out to an average of a 7 overall. All right, so there's a couple weird things about this. So one, even though it has lane departure warning, it seems like it may have some amount of lane keeping. And why I say this is I had where there were 2 lanes merging, and you know where you run out of the center line in between the 2 lanes. There were no other vehicles around me. I tried to cut over while the line was still there, not using my turn signal, and it really felt like the vehicle was fighting me not to cross that line. I've had a couple different times where this has happened. On the same time, I've had a couple times where I was trying to demonstrate this to people and intentionally just cross lanes without my turn signal on, and it wouldn't fight me. So it's very inconsistent. If it is there, it definitely felt like it was there on occasion. So that lack of consistency kind of concerns me, right? If the vehicle, I don't mind if the vehicle has the feature, but it needs to do the feature consistently. So that's one piece. The charger assembly is another piece that's odd. You can unlock the vehicle. So if the vehicle's unlocked, you can open and close the doors, but not be able to pull out the charger. And I've had times where I opened all the doors getting in and out of the vehicle, go to pull the charging plug out, and it's stuck. So I have to go and like hit the unlock multiple times. It also won't let you, for example, I think, and I don't have my vehicle with me to test it, but I think with my i3, I'm able to power it on even when it's on the charger. You can't put it in a gear. This, when it's on the charger, you cannot power it on at all. It will not start the vehicle. So when you do things like, say, if you're, I don't know, waiting at a charger on a hot day like today is, and you want to run the AC while you're waiting, you're going to be running it off the low voltage battery, and that's going to kill that battery. It's also, the AC does not work very well that way. It has to run off the high voltage battery in order to be able to, or the high voltage battery has to be engaged anyway, in order for it to actually get any cold air out. I've tested that already today. So that's kind of an inconvenience. And okay, so my overall user experience rating. Now this is going to be really subjective. It's going to vary from person to person, but this is my experience. Overall, I'm giving it a 6, and here's why. Some of the odd quirk kind of things in it make it kind of less convenient, and I think it's got a lot of great features, but the quirks kind of offset a lot of those. For some people, they may want their EV to be just like their ICE vehicle. For me, if I'm in an EV, I want to feel like I'm in an EV. I want the experience to really show through. The center column is built upon having a hump through the middle of the vehicle because, of course, it could actually have a drivetrain through there or something like that. So you have features like that that take away from the EV experience. You don't have the open floorboard that you would have in an EV. You don't have the frunk that you would have in an EV. As a perfect example to kind of contrast this, I'll use my i3 because it's my vehicle, right? The vehicle is made out of different materials than a regular vehicle. It doesn't drive like a regular vehicle. It doesn't have a center hump. It's got a pass-through floorboard. Everything is different. It's actually a lot more like something from the future or a different planet. It's like a big toy that I can actually use for functional stuff. That's not the case here. This feels much like a regular gas car that just happens to not run on gas. For me, that experience is not so great. So this is all contributed into the rating I gave it. Okay, so if you've been keeping score, we have 8, 7, 7, and 6, giving us an average score of 7, which I think is pretty appropriate. This vehicle is very much oatmeal, right? Oatmeal isn't bad. It's decent for you. It fills you, but you don't want to eat it every day. And I think that that's pretty much the same way I feel about this. So who's this vehicle for? Because there is a market that this vehicle is perfect for. For starters, this is perfect for small families. It's got easy in and out access. For example, my i3, despite the neatness of the suicide doors, they could really be a pain with a car seat and a kid in a parking lot. This has very traditional open door design, 4-door, 5-seater, small families. This would be really great. Also, it's really good, I think, for EV hesitant, right? And how I mean that is there's some people who don't want that different feeling of having an EV. They want the consistent feeling that they've always had in an ICE vehicle. And this is absolutely going to give them that. This is a very easy transition from an ICE vehicle. It's not foreign or alien or weird. It's pretty much the same experience as they would have in an ICE version of this exact same vehicle. All right, so then we come to the bottom line of this, of any review really, is should you buy it, right? And this is where this gets tough because 7 is not a bad score. Generally, if I saw a review of a 7, I would say, hey, that's something worth getting. It's not the greatest in the world. It's not the worst. But in this case, I could say I wouldn't specifically, unless you're in that very specific family, don't want something different and weird. You want a very consistent experience with a nice vehicle. Unless you're in that particular category, I just wouldn't recommend this vehicle for you. Couple things that stand out for me is the competition. This vehicle is 239 miles of range for $39,090. Okay. You have the Mustang Mach-E's $42,895, a bit of a jump. Only has 211 miles, but a much more, for my understanding at least, I haven't reviewed it yet. It's a much more fun drive, right? Likewise, you have the Tesla Model 3. I'm not specifically a Tesla fanboy or anything, but the numbers work, right? You have the Tesla Model 3 has a range of 262. So you have about 20 something miles more range. Oh, and by the way, it comes in at $39,990. So for $900 more, you get greater range. And what I would say overall is a much more exciting and interesting and fun vehicle. That also has 4 doors and a hatchback. So you're not really giving anything up. So in this particular case, given what the competition is out there and what you can get, I would recommend one of those vehicles before this one. But it also depends on what you want, right? So like any review, go try it out for yourself and see what you like and dislike about it, how you like to drive. But I would test a couple vehicles if you're a first-time EV buyer, because for me, this is the second EV I personally have driven, and it doesn't measure up to my i3 in a whole lot of ways. It's got a lot more features, but if I had to pick one to drive for the rest of my life, I would pick the i3 10 out of 10 times. And I'm pretty fairly sure after I drive the Mach-E or the Tesla, I would pick those 10 out of 10 over this as well. All right, so I'd like to give a shout out to my new subscribers, Brian Thielman, Hussein Badal, Michelle Kloskman Johnson, Yudin Jarek, and Sky. Thank y'all for your subscription. Have a great day.